Logan, you're on your own now, my mom said, as she threw me out for my brother. Fine, I muttered under my breath. I'll remember this. I shut the door behind me, quietly, deliberately. No shouting, no dramatic scene, just a final moment of silence between me and the house I used to call home. 6 months later, they were flat broke, and I wasn't answering their calls. My name's Logan, I'm 18 years old, and to my parents, I'm a complete failure. Not because I did anything wrong. I've never been in trouble, never picked up any bad habits, never broke any laws. My only offense, choosing not to go to college right after high school. Instead, I wanted to pursue my freelance work full-time. I'd already been building it up since my sophomore year, and by the time I graduated, I had steady clients, regular income, and a schedule that made sense for me. I was proud of it. I enjoyed it. I felt like I was doing something worthwhile, but my parents, they hated it. You're never going to get anywhere without a degree, my mom would remind me, at least twice a week. You're throwing your future away, Dad would chime in. You really think some little side gig is going to carry you through life? To them, I was reckless, irresponsible, living in denial. No matter how many times I explained that I wasn't against college, I just didn't want to rush into it. They never listened. I told them if things didn't work out, I'd reconsider school. But for now, I wanted to bet on myself. They weren't having it. Around the same time, my older brother Nathan and his wife Jenna were struggling. Rent was draining them, and neither of them were good with money. Jenna loved the expensive lifestyle, and Nathan, he'd never been financially responsible a day in his life. They'd already borrowed from my parents more times than I could count. And while my parents loved to complain about how much support they were giving, they always ended up reaching into their wallets anyway. Then one day I came home to find my mom in my room, digging through my stuff. I stopped in the doorway. What are you doing? She didn't even pause to answer. We need to talk. Right now. A weird sinking feeling hit me. I followed her into the living room, where Dad and Nathan were already sitting like they'd been waiting for me. Jenna wasn't there. She was probably out spending money they didn't have. My mom sat down, folded her hands and said, Logan, you know things have been hard for Nathan and Jenna. They really need a stable place right now. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. My dad sighed like I was the unreasonable one here. We've decided that Nathan and Jenna will be moving in. They need somewhere to stay, and we have the space. We? I asked, blinking slowly. You'll be fine, Logan, my mom said, her voice calm, almost cheerful. You're 18. You've got your own money coming in. You can figure something out. It hit me then. They were kicking me out, just like that. I just stood there for a second, frozen. But this is my room, I said slowly. I live here. You don't pay rent, Nathan cut in before either of them could answer. He had his arms folded like he was the one being wronged. I'm struggling to take care of a whole household. I've got responsibilities. I nearly laughed in disbelief. Jenna doesn't even work and you're constantly spending money on pointless stuff. How is any of that my responsibility? Mom's eyes sharpened. Logan, don't be selfish. You're not our top concern anymore. Nathan and Jenna need this more than you do. Then to drive the point home, she grabbed one of my duffel bags and threw it toward the front door like she was tossing out trash. Start packing, she said flatly. I turned to Dad, waiting hoping that he'd step in, say something, show just a sliver of support. But no, he just gave me a quiet nod, as if everything about this situation made perfect sense. I could have fought, I could have begged, but something inside me clicked in that moment. A part of me just shut down. There was no use arguing. The decision had already been made. Fine, I said. I walked back to my room, stuffed what I could into 2 bags and left. No tears, no angry speech, no dramatic exit. They wanted to pretend I didn't matter. Then I'd give them what they wanted. For a little while I stayed with a friend who let me crash on his couch. It wasn't ideal, but it gave me time to focus. I threw myself into work, late nights, early mornings, non-stop projects. I didn't even notice the days passing. And in those 6 months, everything changed. I went from barely scraping by to earning more money than I ever imagined at my age. Enough to never worry about bills again. Enough to make the idea of asking my parents for help seem laughable. At first, I was just doing freelance jobs, design, copywriting, web stuff, but eventually I started outsourcing, building a team, establishing a brand. Before long, I had a real business, a full-fledged company. I moved into a sleek apartment, decked out my workspace, and finally had the kind of freedom I used to dream about. That's around the time my phone buzzed. An unknown number popped up with a text. Mom, hey sweetheart, how have you been? I stared at the screen for a solid minute. This was the same woman who threw my bags onto the porch without blinking. I didn't reply. A few days later, another text came in. Mom, Logan, it's been a while. We miss you. Will want to come over for dinner? Miss me? That was rich. They hadn't checked on me once after kicking me out. Not a single call, not a single message. But now I was suddenly worth inviting back. I left it on read, then the calls started. I ignored the first few. Then the fifth one in a single day finally broke my curiosity. I picked up. Hello? My mom's voice came through the line, too bubbly to be real. Logan. Oh, it's so good to hear your voice. We were just talking about you. Uh-huh, I said flatly. There was a pause. Then she pushed on. We were wondering how you've been. Maybe you could come by sometime. I smirked. You mean back to the house you kicked me out of? There was a long silence on the line after that. Then I heard my dad clear his throat in the background before his voice replaced hers. Logan, listen, we know things got a little rough before, but we're still family. And family supports one another. I almost laughed out loud. I repeated his words slowly. Family supports one another. That's interesting, I added. Because I don't remember much support when you kicked me out to give Nathan my room. Mom sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. Logan, that's in the past. At the time we thought it was the right decision. But we really miss you, right? And that has nothing to do with the fact that I'm doing well now, huh? Of course not, she said quickly. Too quickly. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, but, well, since you brought it up, we did hear that things are going great for you. Your aunt ran into one of your old teachers. They were going on and on about how proud they were of you. Isn't that nice? Ah, there it was. They had no clue what I was actually doing, but they knew it was going well, and that was enough for them to come crawling back. Huh, that is nice, I said, playing along. Mom gave a nervous chuckle. So why don't you stop by for dinner? I'll make your favorite. We can all catch up. I paused, then said casually, I don't know, Mom. Is there even room for me there? Nathan and Jenna are still living with you, right? There was a beat of silence. Then softly, she muttered, well, about that. I raised an eyebrow. What about it? Dad let out a long sigh before saying, they moved out. I nearly burst out laughing. Of course they did. And, I prompted, waiting for the rest. Mom hesitated. Things have been difficult. Your father and I have been helping them out financially, but it's been tight. Ah, there it was. And that's why you're reaching out to me now, I said. Another pause. Well, we just thought, since you're doing well, maybe you could help out a little. I let out a low whistle. Let me get this straight. You kicked me out because I wasn't a priority. And now that I've got money, I suddenly am. That's not fair, Logan. Dad cut in quickly. We're still your parents. Oh, were you still my parents when you stood by and watched Nathan take my room? When Mom dumped my stuff at the front door like it was garbage? When neither of you reached out for 6 months? There was silence on the line. Then Mom tried again, her voice quivering. Logan, we made mistakes, but we love you, and right now we really need your help. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. This was almost too good. You need my help, I repeated slowly. That's funny, because 6 months ago you told me I wasn't part of the family equation anymore. You made that perfectly clear, right before you chucked my stuff outside. Logan, that was, she started. A choice, I interrupted. Not a mistake, a choice. You chose Nathan over me, and now you're hoping I'll swoop in and save the day. Logan, please, I don't owe you anything, I said coldly. Her voice wavered. Logan, please. We're not trying to use you. We're just struggling. Then my dad spoke up again, irritation slipping into his tone. Son, you're being ungrateful. We raised you, gave you everything you needed. And now when we're the ones who need support, you turn your back on us. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Oh, so now you want to talk about raising me? That's rich. Because when I had nowhere to go, you weren't worried. You didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't lift a finger. And now that I've got money, suddenly it's all about family values and being there for each other. Don't make me laugh. There was a long pause. Then my mom's voice came back, this time more desperate. Logan, your dad's work hours have been cut again. We've been covering Nathan's rent ever since he and Jenna moved out. We're behind on the mortgage, the utilities, everything. We're barely hanging on. Still not my problem, I said, my voice calm and even. Logan, don't be like this, Mom pleaded, but I was already shaking my head, even though they couldn't see me. You told me I wasn't your priority anymore. Well, now you're not mine. Then I ended the call. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Some were guilt trips, others tried to pretend like everything was fine, like nothing had ever happened. I ignored them all. I figured they'd give up eventually. I was wrong. One night while I was finishing up a project, a sudden loud knock echoed through my apartment. It wasn't just a casual knock. It was persistent, sharp, almost frantic. I frowned, pushing away from my desk. I wasn't expecting anyone. A weird feeling crept into my chest as I approached the door. I peered through the peephole and froze. It was them, both of them, my parents standing right outside my door. I didn't move, just stared. How did they even find me? I hadn't given them my address. I hadn't posted anything online that would point to where I lived. Dad knocked again, this time louder. Logan, we know you're in there. Open the door. I stayed perfectly still, mind racing. I hadn't told them anything. So how? Then it hit me. Nathan, he must have gone digging. Found something in my old stuff. Maybe asked around. The thought made my stomach churn. Another knock, harder this time. Logan, we're not leaving, Dad said firmly. You might as well let us in. I stood there for another long moment, debating whether to just pretend I wasn't home, but I knew them. They wouldn't go away. With a slow, heavy sigh, I unlocked the door and pulled it open. The second Mom saw me, her face crumpled like she might cry. Oh, Logan, she breathed. Thank God, we've been so worried. She took a small step forward, like she wanted to hug me. I didn't budge. She hesitated, then dropped her arms and stepped back. I crossed mine and leaned against the door frame. How did you find me? Dad looked uncomfortable. Your brother. Of course, I should have guessed. I stared at them, expression flat. What do you want? Mom looked at Dad, then back at me. Logan, sweetheart, we need help. Yeah, I got that from the missed calls and text storms, I replied. And like I said, I'm not interested. Logan, don't be like this, Dad said, voice low and serious. We're your family. I let out a short, dry laugh. Family? That's funny, because the last time I checked, real family doesn't dump their kids' stuff on the porch to make room for someone else. I shifted my eyes to Mom. That sound familiar to you? She had the audacity to look offended. That's not fair. We never kicked you out. You did kick me out, I snapped, cutting her off. You made a decision. You handed over my room, my space, my place in this house to Nathan, and I was just supposed to disappear quietly. You chose him, and now you're here, pretending like I'm the unreasonable one? Dad's jaw tightened. That's not true. Oh, really? Then explain this. Why didn't you offer me the couch? Why didn't you support me the way you supported him? Why did I have to leave when he was the one who couldn't pay his own rent? They had nothing. Instead, Mom sighed and dropped her eyes. We made some mistakes, okay? But we're in a really bad spot. Your dad's barely getting any hours. We've been paying Nathan and Jenna's bills ever since they moved out, and now we're falling behind on everything. The mortgage, the power bill, all of it. And you think that's my responsibility? I asked coldly. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. Logan, we're desperate. We don't have anyone else to turn to. And whose fault is that? I said, you burned that bridge. You threw me out, remember? You made it very clear I wasn't a priority. So now you're not mine either. Dad took a step closer, trying to puff up a little. It used to work. Not anymore. You can't seriously be this cold, he said, voice tight. I can when it comes to people who tossed me aside the second I made a choice they didn't like. I stared straight into his eyes. I didn't go to college, and that was all it took for you to decide I was a failure. But if I had followed your plan, I'd be in debt right now, drowning. Instead, I built something real. And now I'm finally worth your attention. Mom's eyes started to shimmer. She whispered, we're sorry, Logan. I didn't look away. No, you're not. You're just sorry you're broke. Her face twisted, like my words physically hurt. Dad took a slow breath, clearly holding back whatever anger he wanted to unleash. Logan, he said, steady but firm, we're not asking you to pay off everything, just a little help. Just enough to keep us afloat. I let the silence hang for a second. Then I spoke, calm and unbothered. You need help? Here's an idea. Get a job. Maybe even two. That's what I did. Their faces fell. Mom's voice cracked again. Logan, please. I stepped back inside. I'm done having this conversation. Stay out of my life. and good luck." And with that, I shut the door in their faces. I stood there for a few seconds, hands still on the doorknob, listening. No knocks this time, just silence. Then after a moment, I heard the sound of their footsteps retreating down the hallway. Slow, heavy, like they didn't know where to go next. I let out a long, steady breath and leaned against the door. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I had finally taken control, stood my ground, shut them out just like they had shut me out. And yeah, part of me did feel that, but another small bitter part still hurt, because no matter how cold or selfish they had been, they were still my parents. And now, standing outside my door like strangers, I saw them for what they really were, desperate, crumbling under the weight of their own bad decisions. Still, that didn't mean I owed them anything. They made their choices. I made mine, and I had no intention of going back. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they'd finally take the hint. I was wrong. Again. 3 days later, they showed up, but this time they weren't alone. They brought reinforcements. I heard the knock first, louder than before, a whole rhythm to it, like someone was determined not to be ignored. I rolled my eyes, stood up, and checked the peephole. There they were, all 4 of them. My parents, Nathan, Jenna. My eyebrows rose on instinct, a full-blown family reunion. I opened the door slowly and leaned against the frame with a smirk. Wow, so this is what desperation looks like. Mom looked hopeful, her hands clasped together. Dad looked stern, arms crossed. Nathan had that smug, self-important look he always wore when he thought he was about to get his way. And Jenna? She looked like she was about to yell before I even said anything. "What's the plan here?" I asked. "You thought if you brought the whole crew, I'd change my mind." "Logan, please," Mom started. I cut her off. No, I want to hear it. What's the sales pitch this time?" Because I already said no. And yet, here you all are. Nathan stepped forward, trying to sound reasonable. "Look, man, we're not here to fight. We just want to talk." I arched an eyebrow. "Talk? Now you want to talk? That's funny, because the last time we talked, you were calling me selfish for being upset. You took over my space." Nathan had the nerve to look annoyed. "I didn't take anything. Mom and Dad made that decision." "Oh, trust me, I know exactly who made what decisions," I said, eyes locked on him. "They made it crystal clear who mattered more." I swept my gaze across all of them. "And now you're all lined up outside my door like a bunch of abandoned pets, hoping I'll give you a second chance." Jenna rolled her eyes and scoffed dramatically. "Oh, come on, don't be so overdramatic." I turned toward her slowly. "Overdramatic," I repeated. "Would you like me to remind you exactly how you threw my things onto the lawn like trash? How you stood there smirking and told me to just deal with it?" She rolled her eyes again. "You're still stuck on that?" I grinned coldly. "Oh, you bet I am." I stood there for a few seconds, hands still on the doorknob, listening. No knocks this time, just silence. Then after a moment, I heard the sound of their footsteps retreating down the hallway. Slow, heavy, like they didn't know where to go next. I let out a long, steady breath and leaned against the door. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I had finally taken control. Stood my ground, shut them out just like they had shut me out. And yeah, part of me did feel that. But another small, bitter part still hurt. Because no matter how cold or selfish they had been, they were still my parents. And now, standing outside my door like strangers, I saw them for what they really were, desperate, crumbling under the weight of their own bad decisions. Still, that didn't mean I owed them anything. They made their choices. I made mine, and I had no intention of going back. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they'd finally take the hint. I was wrong. Again. 3 days later, they showed up. But this time, they weren't alone. They brought reinforcements. I heard the knock first, louder than before. A whole rhythm to it, like someone was determined not to be ignored. I rolled my eyes, stood up, and checked the peephole. There they were, all four of them. My parents, Nathan, Jenna. My eyebrows rose on instinct. A full-blown family reunion. I opened the door slowly and leaned against the frame, with a smirk. Wow, so this is what desperation looks like. Mom looked hopeful, her hands clasped together. Dad looked stern, arms crossed. Nathan had that smug, self-important look he always wore when he thought he was about to get his way. And Jenna, she looked like she was about to yell before I even said anything. "What's the plan here?" I asked. "You thought if you brought the whole crew, I'd change my mind." "Logan, please," Mom started. I cut her off. No, I want to hear it. What's the sales pitch this time? Because I already said no. And yet, here you all are. Nathan stepped forward, trying to sound reasonable. Look, man, we're not here to fight. We just want to talk. I arched an eyebrow. Talk? Now you want to talk? That's funny. Because the last time we talked, you were calling me selfish for being upset. You took over my space. Nathan had the nerve to look annoyed. I didn't take anything. Mom and Dad made that decision. Oh, trust me. I know exactly who made what decisions, I said, eyes locked on him. They made it crystal clear who mattered more. I swept my gaze across all of them. And now you're all lined up outside my door like a bunch of abandoned pets, hoping I'll give you a second chance. Jenna rolled her eyes and scoffed dramatically. Oh, come on. Don't be so over-dramatic. I turned toward her slowly. Over-dramatic? I repeated. Would you like me to remind you exactly how you threw my things onto the lawn like trash? How you stood there smirking and told me to just deal with it? She rolled her eyes again. You're still stuck on that? I grinned coldly. Oh, you bet I am. I stood just inside the door, listening. Muffled voices filtered through from the hallway. Mom pleading again, Nathan muttering something under his breath. Dad sighing in frustration. Then slowly the sound of their footsteps faded away. They were finally gone. I stayed frozen for a few moments, staring at the floor, just letting the silence settle. This time I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, just peace. They had made their choice when they kicked me out, and now I had made mine. And I would never, ever look back. Still, the whole thing felt surreal. I mean, what a complete reversal. 6 months ago, I was being thrown out like I was some freeloader crashing their lives. Like I didn't matter. Like I was disposable. Now, they were lining up outside my apartment like I was their last hope. It was almost funny. Almost. The same people who told me I wasn't a priority. The same ones who watched my bags hit the front porch. The same ones who didn't reach out once while I was scraping by, rebuilding from scratch, were now standing outside asking for favors, begging for money, acting like nothing ever happened. But something did happen. They turned their backs on me, and when they did, I learned the most valuable lesson of my life. Sometimes family doesn't mean what it should. Sometimes it's the people closest to you who betray you first. And when that happens, you don't owe them forgiveness. You don't owe them anything. I built my life without them. I struggled, I sacrificed, and I came out stronger. Now they were drowning in their own bad choices, and all I had to do was shut the door. So what do you think? Was I too harsh? Should I have stepped in and helped out? Or did they deserve every bit of the silence I gave them? Because after everything they put me through, I think they got off easy.